The following video presentation will indicate the safety performance of Dale Antiflame protective fabrics. You will see 4 identical style garments in size 42, made with 4 different fabrics exposed to a flash fire. The mannequin wearing the garments has 122 built-in sensors that transmit burn data to a computer. The amount and severity of the burns is then calculated based on the transfer of heat through the garments. The first exposure is a coverall made with Dale Antiflame 1023 lightweight fabric. The exposure is 4 seconds and the energy generated is 2 calories per centimeter squared. Notice how the brief afterflame on the surface of the garment is extinguished after a short time. After the 4-second flash, the garment is still perfectly intact and it has not shrunk under the heat exposure. Notice how the fabric is still very flexible after the exposure. This means that a person wearing this garment would be able to move and escape a flash without the fabric breaking open. Also, the fabric may continue to provide protection from secondary exposures. The garment is so flexible that it is removed from the mannequin intact. The following is an animated picture showing the development of burn injuries. On top of the screen you see the time and the percentage of burns. Notice how the Dale Antiflame coverall has almost no third-degree burns, which in this test is indicated by blue sensor areas. From a medical perspective, the less amount of third-degree burns, the higher chance of survival and recovery. The second garment is a coverall made from Nomex 3A 6-ounce fabric.
2, 1, 0.
The exposure is 4 seconds and the energy generated is 2 calories per centimeter squared. Nomex products generally have very short afterflame. Notice how, after the 4-second flash, the garment has shrunk significantly and has become very tight on the mannequin. Also, the fabric has become very brittle after the exposure. Notice the brittle areas on elbows and knee joints. These are areas that will probably be moved during a run for safety. A person wearing this garment would risk having his garment break open during the exposure and thereby suffer a greater chance of ignition of underclothing or direct heat and flame exposure to the skin. The garment falls apart when it is removed from the mannequin. The animated picture will show the development of burn injuries on the mannequin wearing a Nomex 3A coverall. Notice how the mannequin wearing this coverall receives extensive third-degree burn injury. Moreover, the third-degree burns occur after the actual flame exposure, indicating the relationship between excessive heat shrinkage and loss of heat protection. The third garment is a coverall made with Endura Pro brand 9-ounce fabric. Notice how the afterflame on the surface of the garment is extinguished by a very heavy cloud of off gases. Knowing that these off gases are very hot, we will see a relationship between off gases and burn injury. After the 4-second flash, the garment still seems to be intact and it has not shrunk under the heat exposure. Notice how the fabric looks stiff after the exposure. Moreover, when the fabric is exposed to just a small amount of abrasion, the fabric disintegrates and the garment falls apart. Again, this may be indicative of a product that offers very little protection under movement or against secondary exposures. The garment falls apart when it is removed from the mannequin. The animated picture shows the relationship between off-gases and burn injury. Notice how the third-degree burn occurred after the actual exposure, at about the same time that the heavy cloud of gases came off the fabric. The final garment of this comparison is a coverall made with Dale Antiflame 1033 fabric. Notice again how the brief afterflame on the surface of the garment is extinguished after a short time. After the 4-second flash, the Dale Antiflame garment is still perfectly intact, and it has not shrunk under the heat exposure. Notice how the fabric is still very flexible after the flash fire. Again, this indicates that a person wearing this garment would be able to move and escape a flash without the fabric breaking open. Also, the fabric may continue to provide protection from secondary exposures. The garment is so flexible that it is removed from the mannequin intact. Again, the Dale Antiflame coverall has almost no third-degree burns indicated in this test. Also, it has less total burn area than any of the other products tested. The previous tests were conducted on new garments. On behalf of an end user, in this case a major oil company, we tested some garments that were washed and worn. All tests are carried out under identical conditions to the first 4 exposures, but the garments are different in style and size. The first garment is a coverall made with Dale Antiflame 1033 fabric that has been washed more than 50 times. Notice how the brief afterflame on the surface of the garment is extinguished after a short time. But towards the end of the afterflame, smoke is released in the right leg of the garment. The smoke may be due to residue left in the garment after the rinsing process. After the 4-second flash, the garment is still perfectly intact and it has not shrunk under the heat exposure. Notice how the used fabric has similar flexibility characteristics to those of the new garments. The garment is so flexible that it is removed from the mannequin intact. The test shows that even after many industrial washes, Dale Antiflame products continue to perform. The animated sequence shows a somewhat higher degree of burns than we had on new anti-flame garments, but many of these can be attributed to the change in size and design of the garment. Also, the smoke has generated burns on the right leg. Many clients are interested in the effect of using underwear underneath protective clothing. All the previous tests are performed with no underwear, since the use of underwear may vary from user to user and from climate to climate. In this test, the mannequin is dressed up in long cotton underwear to indicate the added protection of another thin layer of clothing. The mannequin is wearing Dale Antiflame 1033 as an outer layer, and this fabric performs as we expect Dale Antiflame to perform. Notice again the smooth and flexible fabric after the exposure. When the coverall is removed, the underwear is undamaged except for a slight change in color in some areas. The animated sequence shows how the amount of burn injury has been dramatically reduced. The burn injury has been cut to half when compared to the results from just a single layer coverall.